welcome back to Dystopia Now. I am Kate Willett.
I'm Emil Torres.
And oh my gosh, can I tell you something? I went on a camping trip this week and I was completely shut off from the news for 5 days.
Yeah.
And then I opened my phone yesterday
and
it was just like, I was just like, oh my God, a lot has happened. One of the last things I saw before I went offline was Elon Musk accusing Donald Trump of being a pedophile.
Yeah.
And I was like, where is this going? And then I think Trump, I'm still catching up, but I think Trump threatened to deport Elon. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't know if Trump said that. I know Steve Bannon was pushing Trump to expel Musk because Bannon says he's almost certain that Musk is an illegal immigrant, which may be factually correct, right? Elon's brother, I'm forgetting his name, but he said in an interview on stage next to Musk that they entered from Canada illegally.
I was actually kind of looking forward to knowing once and for all who is more powerful, the president of the United States or the richest man in the world. I was looking forward to it, but unfortunately Elon backed off and was, I think, even said today on Twitter something like, I was too harsh on Donald Trump or something like that.
He went too far.
That's a paraphrase.
And he
went
regrets.
Too far.
Yeah. That's disappointing.
Imagine that's like your one regret, right? Like, this is baby's first apology, and it's for calling Donald Trump a pedophile. Well, basically saying that the reason that the Epstein files weren't being released was because Donald Trump was in them.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And of course, there's that interview with Fox News from, I think, last year, where the interviewers are asking Trump, are you going to release the files on JFK and so on? And Trump is saying, yes. It doesn't take him. He's not reflecting on his answer. He immediately says yes. And then they ask about the Epstein files. And he says, well, I don't know. There could be some names in there that kind of got mixed up. And it could be reputationally damaging.
Yeah, you never know whose. You never know whose name.
Exactly.
So there is a lot going on this week. Obviously, there are anti-ICE protests all over the country. There are people setting fire to Waymos, which I just want to say I am on the side of that being super funny.
I mean, they're not just setting fire to them because they those Waymo cars happen to be like in the vicinity. They're calling the cars through the app and then setting them on fire.
Yeah, I mean, to me, okay, I know that people have different opinions on this topic and it's a complicated one, but just for short summary, I'm not somebody who perceives property damage to a corporation as being violence. Like, you can debate the merits of it, but I do not think that that is the same as causing physical harm to a human being. You know, Waymo has insurance and it's like owned by Google. So, I mean, I don't see this as being a violent act.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's many people who would disagree with me, but like, to me, the people who are just going off about the Waymos and these out of control protesters, I'm like, okay, how about what they're protesting? How about the fact that immigrants are being kidnapped and sent to deportation in a concentration camp in El Salvador? I would say that's a little bit more violent than damaging a giant corporation's property.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't see them as commensurate, right? I mean, one is way, way worse. It involves human beings whose lives are being destroyed as a result of these ICE agents arresting them, masked, sometimes without properly identifying themselves, sometimes without a warrant. And yeah, it's really, really atrocious. It's destroying lives of people. And also, I mean, there are videos out there of people from different parts of the world who have been arrested, who are visiting the US. They're here just sojourning, enjoying the cities and so on, and they're being mistakenly arrested. There was a video of a woman who was taken away in handcuffs, and her kid was left behind, just crying on the street. So it's really awful. I mean, I don't endorse the burning of the Waymo cars, and strategically it might not be that good of an idea. It might not be that effective. I could be completely wrong about that. But
I
also,
heard the logic in it though. Like, to me, I think it's less about swaying public opinion and more about like actually physically stopping the ICE raid from being able to happen.
Yeah, I see.
Because it's blocking off traffic and it's preventing the ICE agents from getting where they intend to go.
Yeah.
So in that way, it does seem effective to me.
Yeah.
But I know I'm like, different people can have different opinions on it.
Yeah. So that's actually something I hadn't considered before. So as the effective altruist would say, I'm updating my beliefs. Thank you for that.
Yeah. How many qualies is that?
I don't have an answer. I don't know how many utils
Yeah.
it's produced overall.
Yeah, but then, so I saw the National Guard deployed to LA, which is where I'm from. And then another thing I saw in the news yesterday was that Greta Thunberg was kidnapped by Israel, and it looks like she was subsequently released.
Yeah.
And there has just been a fuck ton of stuff happening. Oh, also, since the last time we talked, Palantir is building a database of all Americans that is going to combine our information from different agencies. I think that this is something that they were able to get the data from through the Doge project. So there is a ton to talk about news-wise.
And the numbers that I've seen so far is that Trump, in deploying the military to LA, has cost taxpayers $134 million so far, right? And also with respect to Greta Thunberg, I saw an interview of her just today, really just like an hour ago. The reporter asked her why she thinks so many countries around the world continue to either support Israel or be silent. And her answer, I thought, was really good. She just said, well, in short, racism.
Yeah.
And she's not wrong, so...
No, I totally, I'm with her on that. And I think this is obviously like one of the kind of longest topics that we could possibly get into.
Yeah.
But I'll just say that I don't think that I realized how much just straight up racism is going on until 2023.
Yeah.
I've always been a supporter of Palestinian rights, but I was really thinking that maybe a lot of it was more complicated than racism, and it actually turns out that in a lot of the situations it is not more complicated than racism.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree with that. But I just wanted to say there is like a ton to talk about today, and I think with all of these issues, with the surveillance that we're starting to see escalate both through Waymos and this Palantir database, and oh my God, Welcome Fest happens, the gathering of centrist abundance Democrats, so stupid and horrible. And by the way, I think every elected official that was at Welcome Fest signed a resolution thanking ICE for their service. This is like in the past 2 days, and trying to encourage more local and state collaboration with ICE. The New York mayoral race is heating up. Anyway, I'm listing things that we do not have time to talk about today, but I promise that we will get into at least most of this in a episode very soon. But today our topic is something that a lot of you have requested, which is transhumanism and Christianity. And it's something that I know I'm really fascinated by, and Emil just wrote a really good article about, so we thought we would do an episode on that.
Yeah, this sounds good. So let's dive in.
Let's dive in. Okay, so first of all, what is your background with Christianity? As much as you feel comfortable saying, like, I think that you've mentioned that this is a religion that you practiced at one point in your life.
Yeah, I was very religious growing up. In fact, I met just kind of randomly. We happened to be crossing paths in Berlin a few years ago. Somebody from my childhood who knew me quite well in high school. And they said that before they met me, they looked me up, saw that I was an atheist, and were shocked by this.
Wow.
Because this guy named Brett, he said, yeah, when I knew you, you were all about Jesus. So yeah, and I attended like a Baptist church, but I think the most salient feature of the kind of religious community that I grew up in is this particular interpretation of Holy Scripture called dispensationalism. And
I don't know what that is. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so it's kind of an obscure term. Even a lot of Christians who exist within the dispensationalist tradition aren't familiar with the term. But dispensationalism introduced the idea of the rapture, which just about everybody's heard of. So people are familiar with dispensationalism, even if they're not conversant with that term itself. This is an interpretation of Scripture that was introduced by a guy named John Nelson Darby in the second half of the 19th century. So it's pretty new. It's a pretty new way of reading the Bible. And part of the dispensationalist view is an account of Christian eschatology, which is novel. And so I mentioned the rapture just a moment ago. That was part of it. So it's this idea that Jesus will descend from the clouds and gather up all of the currently living believers to temporarily hang out with him in some kind of ethereal realm, as well as all of the Christians who have traversed the path from the cradle to the grave since 70 AD. That's when the second temple was destroyed. So that's a dispensation. That's an epoch in cosmic history, according to this interpretation. So all of the dead will be resurrected, and then all of the living will meet Jesus in the clouds. And then after that, the Antichrist will rise up. There will be a battle of Armageddon between Christ and the Antichrist. Christ will win. And then there's the 1,000-year millennial kingdom. And
the only good thing I could see about any of this is that Peter Thiel might legitimately be the Antichrist, and it would be cool for someone to kick his ass. That would be neat to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is he has amalgamated the transhumanist sort of eschatological narrative with the Christian narrative. So he's sort of a proof of concept in that he has actually done this already. And what I'm arguing in the article is that more and more Christians are beginning to sort of follow in his foot. I mean, he has a particular kind of idiosyncratic view, but more and more Christians are incorporating elements of transhumanism into their understanding of Christian eschatology, which has been hugely influenced in the US really since the 1970s by the dispensationalist interpretation.
There's a couple things that come to mind. One, I have to say, I am not particularly surprised to find out that you have a religious background. Something about the way that you have engaged with morality throughout your life strikes me as fairly serious. You take very seriously figuring out what the right thing to do is. And I actually think that that's a beautiful, wonderful quality. But there's definitely a lot of people too that have a more casual approach to it. I have wondered at times, was that sort of sense of like thinking really hard about what is the right thing to do? Is that something that came from religion for you at an early age, do you think?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there are different theories within what philosophers call normative ethics. So this is the branch of ethics that concerns questions about what you ought to do.
Yeah.
And like, listeners who've taken a moral philosophy class, like an introductory class, will know that there's like consequentialism, utilitarianism being the most significant version of consequentialism, virtue ethics, and deontology. But those are secular theories, right? But there are other religious theories like divine command theory. So what is morally right is whatever God says you ought to do.
Yeah.
And so Christian ethics is that to a certain extent. You have the 10 Commandments. These are things that you ought to do. You may have other secular reasons for agreeing that we should not lie, cheat, murder, and so on. But the reason you need to follow the 10 Commandments is because God said so. So in a sense, like, I would consider Christianity to be built on a flawed moral theory. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I was also pretty religious growing up. I was baptized Catholic and I went to Catholic school until I was about 12. And then I went to public school, but I got involved in like a Christian Baptist kind of youth group.
Nice.
And that was really bizarre.
Yeah.
It's completely different than Catholic church. You know, Catholic church is very formal, and the Christian like youth group scene, I don't know if any listeners did like Young Life or something like
Yes,
that,
I
but
did.
It's all about like playing acoustic songs on the guitar, and like for the first like I don't know hour, it seems like a fairly normal gathering, if not a bit too wholesome. But then they kind of closed it out with like, by the way, if you don't believe everything that we say, you are gonna burn in hell forever. I think I was really fucked up by the hell stuff for like even a long time after I stopped believing that it was true. It was kind of like, oh no, what if it is true? And so I do, I guess in a sense, have some empathy for the people who got really into like the Rocco's Basilist stuff, because I'm like, I understand how like an idea can just sort of capture you, like a terrifying idea. And I think that was like hell for me also.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I remember watching animated videos of hell that absolutely gave me nightmares. There were just these demonic skeletons with pitchforks who were stabbing the damned, the reprobates, amidst just like this fiery hellscape. I am no fan of the New Atheist movement. I've written about this before.
Yeah.
I think that movement is deeply misguided in so many ways. But there was one thing that some of them said, which is that at least certain forms of religion, maybe like Baptist, like dispensational, fire and brimstone Christianity could be seen as forms of child abuse. And I'm sympathetic with that view because it caused a lot of anxiety when I was growing up. And then, finally, like I wasn't as precocious as other peers in this respect, but I did apostatize my faith in the early 2000s. So when I was in my early 20s, and it wasn't long after that I discovered transhumanism. And transhumanism checks so many of the same boxes, right? I mean, literally, I mentioned this on previous podcasts, that one of the first book-length treatments of transhumanism, the word wasn't around at the time, but the idea was published by this leading eugenicist named Julian Huxley, and it was titled, revealingly, Religion Without Revelation. So the whole point was, if you look at the literature from the 19th century, so 1800s, this is when Christianity really began to decline in the Western world. It's when Nietzsche said God is dead, Karl Marx denigrated religion as the opium of the masses, and so on. And you find that people are just reeling, like all of these atheists and agnostics are just reeling from the loss of religion, all of the purpose, the meaning, the eschatological hope for the future.
And can you give like a super quick definition of eschatology? Because I know that some listeners have like just joined and are listening to episodes out of order. So just a real quick one.
Yes, absolutely. It literally translates as the study of last things.
Okay.
So it just concerns the end of the world.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. And so there are different interpretations. There's like eschatology was a branch of theology for the longest time. It concerned the study of things I'd mentioned before, like the Rapture, the Battle of Armageddon, the Antichrist, and so on. And then in the 1970s, it acquired this new secular scientific version. Well, it became this new scientific branch of cosmology that studied the long-term evolution of the universe as a whole. So there are different ways, but there are different ways you can use the word eschatology, but it really just means like the end of the world as we know it.
It's the end of... Okay,
yeah. It's a good song.
It is. I really like that song. So this article that you wrote called Machine Learning MAGA, Rise of the Christian Cyborg. I like the way you set this up. If I'm understanding it correctly, there's kind of two branches of MAGA right now. There are the evangelical Christians and there is the tech people. And the evangelical Christians, they'd also be in the same branch as kind of the right populists, the Steve Bannon types. But then there's like the tech side of it as well. Am I getting that right?
Yes, absolutely. So I call them the traditionalists and the transhumanists. And the traditionalists aren't just evangelicals. I mean, they are a prominent group within the traditionalist demographic. But like Bannon, J.D. Vance, there's a bunch of others who are Catholic.
Yeah.
And so
the Red Scare women.
Yeah.
Dasha, Anna, Amy Therese.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is also a Catholic, although I think she was raised in evangelical. I think that was the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, and basically the premise of the article is consider the feud between Musk and Bannon.
Yeah.
Right. So we had referenced this at the beginning of the conversation. Bannon hates Musk. He sees Musk as a globalist, as a billionaire oligarch, exactly the kind of person who the populist traditionalists should be fighting against, right? And Bannon has also repeatedly mentioned transhumanism in interviews and saying like one reason he really dislikes Musk is because Musk wants to basically put our smartphone in our brains, which is true. That's the point of Neuralink, to hook us up to machines, maybe to the internet. And so given the rancor between these two individuals representing those respective groups of the traditionalists and the transhumanists, you might think that if you are a leftist like me, maybe there's like a wedge to be forced.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some way to catalyze the acceleration of this schism within the MAGA movement. But basically what I suggest is that, to the contrary, maybe these two groups are, or at least the ideologies that they embrace, maybe they're compatible after all. And we're sort of seeing more and more, as I mentioned before, these traditionalists who are embracing elements of transhumanism, and also transhumanists who are beginning to open up to Christianity.
And I think we have seen evolutions of Christianity in the United States before that have occurred in response to political circumstances. One of the ones that comes to mind for me is evangelical Christianity making abortion into a huge issue. I think pre the 19 70s or so, you would really see Christians on both sides of that issue and members of both political parties on both sides of that issue. But it wasn't seen as this kind of defining religious thing for a lot of people to be what we call pro-life, anti-abortion. But the Republican Party needed to have an issue that was really going to galvanize people. And what their main concern, the thing that they really valued most, was school segregation. But they found that they were not able to mobilize enough Christians politically with the issue of school segregation. People had weird feelings about being openly pro-segregation in some cases. There were a lot of Christians at that time that were of the mind that like politics is more of a worldly endeavor and it's not something that Christians should really get involved in. But the Republican Party deliberately made inroads with these Christian pastors to really highlight the emphasis on abortion as this giant religious issue. And now it's like one of the biggest kind of like moral religious issues in the Christian community in the United States. And it's transformed our politics really, really heavily with Roe versus Wade. So I almost am wondering, can we be looking at a move or a shift of that scale rather coming up with transhumanism?
I think it's entirely plausible, in my opinion. I mean, another example, historical example to mention that concerns the way that Christian beliefs evolve to incorporate contemporary events. So like in this case, as I understand it, there was a conscious decision to make abortion an issue. Right. So suddenly, like now, a core aspect of being a Christian is holding the quote unquote moral view that abortion is obviously wrong. Right. But that's an innovation. And similar phenomena have happened with respect to Christian eschatology. So this is something I've been really interested in for a long time. I mentioned the article, I write about it in the last book that I published, Human Extinction. So for example, like nuclear weapons. I mean, you might think like nuclear weapons would in some way like undermine the eschatological narrative, the end times narrative of Christianity. Because how do nuclear weapons fit into this view about the Antichrist, rising to power, the Battle of Armageddon, and so on? Like the Bible never says, then there will be this huge bomb, and this bomb will destroy nations, and so on. Especially after the year 1954. So people can look this up. We don't need to go into the details now, but that's when the Castle Bravo debacle happened. And 2 years before that, thermonuclear weapons were invented. So right away, people integrated nuclear weapons into their prior eschatological beliefs. These eschatological beliefs are simultaneously rigid and extremely elastic, right? They really can fit all sorts of changes in the geopolitical milieu, changes to our technology, and so on. And so suddenly you literally had people like Ronald Reagan, who in 1971, when he was governor of California, saying that nuclear weapons are clearly a fulfillment of prophetic scripture, in particular a verse in Ezekiel in the Old Testament. Later on, he said that we may be the generation as a result of the Cold War and the new development of these weapons to see Armageddon. And two other examples. So there was a televangelist named Jim Robbins who Reagan invited to give 1984 Republican National Convention opening prayer. And he said, "There will be no peace until Jesus comes. Any preaching of peace prior to his return is heresy. It's against God's word." Jimmy Swaggart said, "We should not make any agreements with the Soviet Union, but should instead withdraw the United Nations and increase our nuclear stockpile." So they wanted the Cold War to persist, and they wanted to increase their nuclear arsenal because they thought, oh yeah, of course, Armageddon is going to be a nuclear event, right? There was even some critics of Reagan when he was running for president who referred to his view as nuclear dispensationalism, right? So there is precedent. There is lots of precedent for Christianity weaving together new technologies into their ancient prophetic beliefs, right? And so that's what the article is really about. Already, for example, you have Steve Bannon, who is one of a growing chorus of Christian apocalypticists out there who are now suggesting or outright declaring that the Antichrist will be a superintelligence, right? And so just as Reagan might have said, like, before nuclear weapons, like, none of this made sense. Now that we have nuclear weapons, it does. Oh, of course, this is how it's going to happen. You have Christians saying basically the same thing. Like, how exactly is the Antichrist going to rise up to gain global power, deceive huge numbers of people around the world? It's all just very improbable, right?
Yeah.
But maybe superintelligence, maybe that is how.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this, like, it like slots right in there.
It slots right in. Yes.
In this article, you go into a couple different ways that this seems to be happening. One way is kind of, I think, the most straightforward, which is that several leaders in the tech community have embraced Christianity. So they're kind of at the nexus of this merging.
Yeah.
Like Peter Thiel is religious. Gary Tan, I don't think we've talked about Gary on the show yet, but he's not a billionaire, but he is a centimillionaire, and he is the CEO of Y Combinator, which is a startup accelerator in San Francisco. He started his own, I almost want to say youth group. It's not a youth group. It's like a tech bro group for techies in San Francisco, who he's trying to get more people into Jesus from the tech industry. And I think it's not even just all for existing Christians, it's for like Christian curious. And it seems really bizarre. But you think about San Francisco, it's this city that is historically very countercultural. There's a lot of LGBT people there. You don't think about like Christianity being a big thing in San Francisco, I guess, but it's definitely growing there. And I think in part because of these tech leaders.
I'm seeing people in the MAGA movement who started off as non-religious becoming increasingly open to religion. So I've seen people talk about how Joe Rogan is now like attending church. I think that's the case. So this merger goes both ways. It's not just Steve Bannon saying, oh yeah, maybe the Antichrist is superintelligence. It's people like Elon Musk, he's been described as a quote unquote atheist icon in the past. He now calls himself, just recently, he said this, a cultural Christian, right? So that's a big step in one direction. So it's just, to me, it's not going to be surprising if this merger reaches some kind of completion at some point in the future. And the other thing I point out in the article is it's not just that religious individuals, the traditionalist MAGAs, who are now suggesting that the apocalyptic elements of Christian eschatology could be intimately bound up with the development of advanced AI. But there's also this growing sense that AI might be a force that works with God rather than against God, right?
Or is God.
Or is.
In some cases.
So this is yet another thing that I point out is there's so many people who are really enthusiastic about AI, who describe advanced AI, superintelligence, etc., as godlike AI. So the parallels between transhumanism and traditional Christianity are so similar. And I don't think that's a coincidence because, like I said before, if you go back to the origins of transhumanism, it was people who looked around and said, we don't have Christianity anymore. Well, can we design something, some kind of worldview that can take the place, that can fit the Christianity-shaped hole left behind? So yeah, to me, as large language models become increasingly good at spitting out sentences that look compelling, I think it's just a matter of time before people start saying this text produced by AI was divinely inspired. As these AI systems become more and more what are described as agentic systems, so more and more like they behave more and more like agents, then it's going to become increasingly difficult for many people to avoid attributing consciousness or sentience to them. Right.
Yeah. And I think we saw that before, like in kind of a different context and not religious, but spiritual context of these like new age type of people that are getting into believing that the AI is the way of the universe communicating with them. They're having a relationship with ChatGPT that is destroying aspects of their lives, which is very sad. But I mean, I could see how it's like this text just shows up on a screen and it seems like a person and you feel like it understands you. Every once in a while, even when I've used AI, I've typed it. Don't worry, it's not going to be that bad. I've typed in a question of like, I was having trouble finding articles on something. So I decided to look on ChatGPT instead of Google. And, like the first thing that it'll say back to me is like, wow, that's a really thoughtful question. And I'm like, thank you. I have to remember, like, this is not a person. Still get that little ego boost.
There was a really good Rolling Stone article recently about these kind of new agey people, but also maybe some of them are Christian as well, who are claiming to be speaking to angels and God through ChatGPT. This is increasingly common. And so I think it's just a matter of time before people start to see at least some AI systems as prophets, as messengers from the divine, channeling God's superintelligence through its own superintelligence. And Yeah, so that's the other half of this merger between transhumanism and Christianity is these AI systems might be like working with God, but also they might be the Antichrist. And it's not an either or. It could be both, right? Maybe the future, like maybe Armageddon will be mostly fought by like AI systems, some of which are on the side of good, capital G, others are on the side of evil.
Let me read one paragraph from your article that really struck me, if that's okay with you. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay. So on the other hand, if we create a super intelligence that loves us, wait, what was okay, so on the other hand part, it's like we could have a super intelligence that destroys us, right? So, okay, so on the other hand, if we create a super intelligence that loves us, then our manifest destiny in the cosmos will be assured. Some transhumanists describe super intelligence as, quote, godlike AI, end quote, with others calling efforts to build it, quote, divinity engineering, end quote. The resulting singularity will be akin to the Christian rapture, whereby Jesus lifts believers into the clouds and sometime before, during, or after the tribulation. Some thus dub the singularity the, quote, techno rapture, end quote, or quote, rapture of the nerds, end quote, as it marks a history rupturing moment when super AI built by computer scientists in AI labs will rescue humanity from the time of perils and inaugurate a fundamentally new epoch, or what evangelical Christians would call a dispensation in cosmic history. After merging with technology and uploading our minds to computers, we will spread the, quote, light of consciousness, end quote, beyond Earth, and the universe as a whole will begin to, quote, wake up, end quote. That is our moment of salvation. I was reading this and I was like, damn, some people believe some crazy ass shit. The rapture of the nerds is a great phrase, though. Yeah.
I think that comes from Cory Doctorow. I think, or at least he co-authored a book, a novel a while back. But yeah, the techno rapture. I mean, that is essentially what the singularity is. So again, the parallels between kind of the narrative that is at the heart of the TESCRO worldview, right? Transhumanism to long-termism. It is so isomorphic, if you will. It's so similar in its shape and its structure to the Christian narrative. I mean, it really is just kind of a secularized version of that narrative. And I think when one recognizes that, it becomes clear that the merging of those two narratives, Christianity and TESCROism, is like it takes a small step in the direction of each other for the merge to become complete.
And what are the early signs, or maybe the mid-stage signs that you're seeing that this merging has happened?
Yeah, good question. I mean, Bannon would be an example. Here's one way to describe the situation with Bannon. Years ago, I published some articles about how certain Christian apocalypticists were beginning to incorporate superintelligence into their narrative. And there were just a few examples out there from fringe figures. So just 2 months ago, when I was writing this article, I searched Google again for the first time in years, superintelligence, Antichrist. And oh my God, there were so many examples. Like there have been books that have been written specifically on this topic. Found on Google Scholar, there was a high school student who published in a student academic journal an article about how AI looks to be fulfilling prophecy. So this idea has absolutely gained so much traction. On the other hand, as we were saying before, more and more Christians are using apps to engage with their faith, right? There are pastors out there who are using AI to generate their sermons. There are a ton of AI sermon generators, which was surprise to me. I didn't know that was the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so much evidence that, I mean, even since having published the article, a bunch of people have tagged me on social media. I'm embarrassed to say I'm still on X. So they've tagged me on X because under posts from pastors who are talking about the importance of AI. So as I mentioned in the article, there's a survey that was conducted just recently that found that 77% of pastors polled already, quote, agree that God can work through AI. I think the evidence is pretty substantial that this merger is happening. And I think that should be a little frightening because, if you have like the Christian demographic, like Christians in the US who begin to see AI as some kind of channel to God, maybe a divine messenger, a prophet, who start to think that, start to believe in AI revelations, right? But also maybe see AI as the key to bringing about the end of the world. Then they could advocate for the development of AI even more. Why would they want the world to end? Well, because on the other side of the apocalypse is utopia, right? This is exactly why the pastors and so on who were associated with Reagan during the Cold War wanted the Cold War to heat up. As soon as we get the apocalypse, the sooner we get paradise. Maybe you and I then don't have to die to enter heaven like everybody else. And that, by the way, parallels exactly what the test realists say. If we get AGI that is controllable in the near future, then we get to live forever without ever having died. Right. Whereas the other transhumanists, like maybe they have to freeze their, cryogenically freeze their bodies. So they have to die before they're resurrected.
We have to wrap up for today. We'll certainly return to this topic, but I thought we could end with this quote that you found from Brian Johnson, which is truly insane, in my opinion. Do you want to read it or do you want me to?
I could read it.
Okay, but you have to do Brian Johnson impression with your skin. You want to pull it as taut as you can so that I'm really getting the sense that it's him talking to me. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm willing to do that.
That's fine.
I need to.
I thought I would try my luck. Yeah.
So he says on this podcast, the irony is that we told stories of God creating us. And I think the reality is that we're creating God. This, by the way, so I'm adding some commentary here. This is not his original thought. This is what people have been saying for a long time. He continues, we're creating God in the form of superintelligence. If you say, what have we imagined God to be? What are its characteristics? We're building God in the form of technology. It will have the same characteristics. And so I think the irony is that the human storytelling got it exactly in the reverse, that we're the creators of God and that we will create God in our own image.
It's truly so narcissistic. It's like whatever level of like ego reduction has traditionally been part of, I think, really all religions. The idea that there is a higher power bigger than you, that there is something that you need to humble yourself to, listen to. People have called it all different kinds of things. But I think for these tech billionaire bros, the idea of placing themselves above God as the creators of literal God, there's something very appealing about that to these egomaniacs.
It's kind of messianic, you might say.
Yeah, this is all really nuts. We will return to this topic in the near future as transhumanism and Christianity continues to terrifyingly merge. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I just want to take a moment to thank our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for being members of the show. We have a few new Patreon supporters that I want to give a special shout out to. Stevie, Tessa, Steven, Oliver, Andrew, Josie, Andy. Those are the folks that just joined recently. So thank you so much. Please check out our bonus content. We're doing a series right now on the Zizians that we are going to wrap up very soon. We have our first 2 episodes out and we have a Q&A up there. So thank you so much for being a supporter. You are how we keep the show going. We did just start working with an editor, so we're going to be putting out video content again very soon.
And we'll have transcripts soon.
And transcripts really soon. Big developments over here at Dystopia Now. On this camping trip, I actually met somebody who was a listener of our podcast. And the way that they found the podcast was that they used to work for Democracy Now! And found our show had a similar title. So checked it out. And I thought that was really funny.
Democracy Now!, Dystopia Now. Yeah, that's amazing. Amazing contrast.
We're like a far less serious Amy Goodmans, the Amy Goodmans of Tech Bros. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in.
Yes, thank you.